Hello and welcome back to my channel dedicated to philosophy, music and art and culture and books and so on and so forth. Karl Jaspers and his famous work about AXIAL time or AXIAL age. Karl Jaspers connects the crisis epochs in the development of human beings, human culture, with the disintegration of integrated unity. And man, he argues, always creates for himself a picture of the world, of the whole, and first in the form of myths, as you know, and then in the picture of divine deeds. In these myths, of course, divine deeds that drive the political destinies of this world, of our world, and then as a complete understanding of history given in Revelation from the creation of the world and the fall of man to the end of the world and the last judgment in the Christianic paradigm. The main concept of Jaspers' philosophy of history is presented in the book The Origins and Goal of History, years 1949, so it's 20th century, middle of 20th century. And Jaspers distinguished between natural and historical in human life, and the natural concept refers not only to the biological aspect of life, but also to the life of cultural organisms, which, according to the popular theory of Oswald Spengler, at that time, live, grow, and die like biological objects. These cultural organisms live, grow, and die. So, in this way, natural being unfolds in time, and the continuity of life forms is carried out as inheritance, genetic or something like this. According to Jaspers, natural phenomena are continuously reproduced, returning to their circles again and again, and this cycle of repetition and return constitutes its character. And the historical dimension. The historical dimension is the main subject, in my opinion. This dimension in human existence is a semantic dimension. History differs from all natural processes in time in the same way as meaning differs from a sign. Continuity in history is carried out as a tradition, and Jaspers says that at the beginning of history, a certain capital of human existence, human being, accumulated in the prehistoric era is revealed, which is not biologically inherited. It's very important, but a historical substance that can be increased or wasted. This capital of meaning, wholeness, or unity is transmitted as the quintessence of life and thought of generations, assimilating it through its roots. It's something that can remain us, a Heideggerian concept, maybe. A person only becomes a person throughout these roots and historical dimension. The historical dimension of a person's life or the life of meaning has its source situation, inspiration. The situation is, so to speak, a unit of meaning, bundle of meaning. The situation is always individual and always integral. Its semantic content is determined by its boundaries. The boundaries of a situation are the boundaries of the possibilities open in it. Thus, history is comprehended and assimilated by a person as a sequence of a realized sequence of something realized by him and others people of opportunity. So the meaning of history can only consist in the integrity of its events. The meaning is always this, that is temporary and that is eternal. The truth is revealed through actual activity, action, and in the being of man. This happens as the unfolding of the possibilities of human existence in the transition of its temporary existence from an unknown source to an unknown departure. So we know nothing, to tell the truth, about us, about ourselves. This is the main mystery of history, emphasized Jaspers. And being aware of himself historically, a person remembers the past, perceiving history as a whole world of events. In search of our essence, we go deep into time to the beginning of the beginning, but we don't find it, and our historical consciousness, together with our history, appears before us in free floating in time with the starting point, which ultimately is only in ourselves. The present seems to us the only measure of history, and according to Karl Jaspers, only the present is valid. All the past and the future are valid only as the present, incomprehensive, this present, so as that in which it's present in the present. The present is always the axis around which the whole story revolves. He identifies 4 periods of human history: the Promethean epoch, prehistory, which covers the time of human formation, from the emergence of language and races, and to the beginning of historical cultures. It signs the beginning of the use of fire and some instruments, maybe, the appearance of speech as language, of course, human forming violence against oneself. For example, taboo, something is prohibited. Formation of groups and communities, formation of life through images, semantical view. Myths. Jaspers notes that the formation of a person is the deepest mystery, the solution of which we will not be able to solve until the final answer to the question of what a person is will be found. The first great crisis in the history of world culture was the time of the destruction of isolated cultures and the creation of empires. The era of the great cultures of Antiquity. These are firstly the Sumero-Babylonian, Egyptian and Aegean cultures of the 4th millennium or era. Let's say, secondly, the pre-Aryan culture of the Indus Valley of the 2nd millennium, and finally the archaic world of China. Maybe 2nd era, millennia before our era. Among the events that led to the beginning of history, the philosopher names the following: the need to organize and regulate the irrigation system in the valleys of large river, Tiber, Euphrates, Nile. So the discovery of writing, which occurs around 3000 maybe BCE in Egypt and 2000 in China BCE. Writing is very important for effective government. The emergence of people who are aware of their unity with a common language. This community is differentiated thanks to language. common culture and common myths, the emergence of world empires, the emergence of which the researcher associates with the needs of a fight against nomads, for which it becomes necessary to conquer neighboring lands and the nomads themselves. And third period, or historical period of time, the epoch of the spiritual basis of human existence, axial time, the axis of world history, should be attributed apparently to the time around 500 BC, before Christianity, to the spiritual process that took place between 800 and 200 BCE. Then there was a sharpest turn in history. A man of this type appeared, which has been preserved to this day. And we will briefly call this time axial time. At this time, a person is aware of being as a whole, of himself, themselves, and their borders, facing the horror of the world. So there is a spiritualization of being, of human being, and a being as such. A person goes beyond his individual being, aware of his place in the wholeness of being, that he is embarking on the path that he must take as a given individual. Karl Jaspers describes such significant phenomena of world history as the emergence of language and poetical language, and maybe the beginning of the philosophy and culture and art and spiritual foundation of mankind, which occurred in 8 to 2 centuries before Christianity, simultaneously and independently in China, India, Persia, Greece, Palestine, prepared in Europe with, at the end of the Middle Ages, the birth of the scientific and technical era, which is spiritually constructed in the 17th century. Our era acquires an all-encompassing character from the end 18th century and receives extraordinary development in the 20th century, and some difficult points are dependent with this development, of course. So the transition to universality was being made in all directions in axial time. Confucius and Lao Tse live in China during this period and create their learning. Confucius, and all the trends of Chinese philosophy are taking shape. The works of philosophers Mao Tzu, Zhuangzi, and countless other thinkers belong to this period. The Upanishads arise in India. The Buddha begins his activity, his teaching. In the philosophy of India and China, all the possibilities of philosophical research, investigations, comprehension of reality are considered, up to skepticism and naturalism, materialism, sophistry, and nihilism. In Persia, Zarathustra creates the doctrine of a world in which there is a struggle between good and evil. So, axial time acts a prerequisite for universal communication, It's not only about understanding other people, but also about knowing yourself, knowing myself, thereby overcoming your limitations and isolation. And for a period of time, the era of science and technology. Its beginning dates back to the 17th century. At the end of the 18th century, there is a leap in the development of technology. There are machines that automatically produce consumer products, and in place of ancient mechanics, the possibilities of which are limited by the power of wind, water, and the muscular strength of people and animals, modern energy is coming. This leap would have been impossible if there had been no progress in science, of course. Technology comes into a person's life and changes it. And Karl Jaspers writes that there are two breaths in human history. The first leads from the Promethean culture epoch through the great cultures of Antiquity to AXIAL time with all its consequences. Thus, we are talking about the first three periods of history, and the fourth period, the era of science and technology, can be called the second Promethean Era. And the thinker Jaspers believes that it's a second breath. Second breath originates here, which may also lead to a new AXIAL time. The differences between them are as follows. Firstly, today we can rely on the knowledge of the past, which was impossible for people who lived during the first breath period. Secondly, the events taking place today affect the whole of humanity as a whole, whereas in the first breath each event had a local character. Along with the classification of historical epochs, Jaspers also gives a classification of peoples in relation to the AXIAL time. And the AXIAL peoples who were able to make a leap and be born again, as Pythagoras, as Lao Tse, the Chinese, Indians, Iranians, Jews and Greeks, and the people who don't know the breakthrough. We are talking about such cultures as the Egyptian and Babylonian and subsequent peoples. Further, he divides all peoples into those whose basis of formation was the world that emerged as a result of their breakthrough, and those who stayed away. The first are historical peoples, and the second are primitive peoples. So, after the AXIAL time, new peoples enter the historical arena. These are Germans and Slavs in the West, Japanese, Malays, Siamese in East Asia. So that's it. Thank you for your attention and see you to the next time. Bye.